Black smoke billowed from our front porch like a demonic cloud against the morning sky. The acrid smell of burning wood and melting plastic filled my nostrils as I sprinted from my car, my heart hammering against my ribs. Our wheelchair ramp was engulfed in orange flames that licked hungrily at the house's vinyl siding. "Dad, Dad, help me!" Tommy's voice pierced through the crackling inferno, high-pitched with terror. My 9-year-old son was trapped inside, his wheelchair unable to navigate the front steps without the ramp that was now a blazing skeleton of charred wood and twisted metal. I vaulted over the hedge, separating our property from the sidewalk, my badge bouncing against my chest as I ran. 23 years as a federal arson investigator had taught me to read fires, like other people read books. But this wasn't just another case. This was my home. This was my son. "Tommy, stay away from the front door," I shouted, already pulling out my phone to call 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding before me. "Fire department en route, sir. Estimated arrival time 4 minutes." 4 minutes felt like 4 hours when your child is screaming for help. The back door. I sprinted around the house, my lungs burning from the smoke that seemed to follow me like a vengeful spirit. The rear entrance was clear, and I burst through the kitchen door to find Tommy pressed against the living room window, his small hands leaving desperate prints on the glass as he watched his accessibility ramp being consumed by flames. "It's okay, buddy. I'm here." I scooped him up from his wheelchair, feeling his thin arms wrap around my neck with desperate strength. His body trembled against mine, and I could feel his tears soaking through my shirt collar. "Why would someone do this?" "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking, "why would someone burn my ramp?" I carried him outside to the back patio, away from the smoke and heat. But I couldn't carry him away from the question that would haunt us both. Why indeed, the ramp had been built with full HOA approval 6 months ago, after Tommy's accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. It was a simple wooden structure, professionally installed and painted to match our house's trim. Nothing offensive about it. Nothing that should have warranted this kind of destruction. The fire department arrived with their usual efficiency. Red trucks screaming down Maple Street with sirens that made the neighbors emerge from their houses like prairie dogs. Captain Rodriguez, whom I'd worked with on several arson cases, approached me with a grim expression. "Mike, I'm sorry about this. Any idea who might have done it?" I shook my head. But even as I did, my investigator's mind was already cataloging details. The burn pattern suggested an accelerant had been used. The fire had started at the base of the ramp and spread upward, which wasn't consistent with an electrical malfunction or spontaneous combustion. This was deliberate. This was arson. And I had a pretty good idea who was responsible. 3 weeks earlier, life had been ordinary in the suburban maze of Willowbrook Estates. Tommy was adjusting well to his new reality, his natural resilience shining through as he learned to navigate the world from his wheelchair. The ramp had been a godsend, allowing him to come and go independently, to feel like a normal kid again, despite everything that had changed. I remember the morning I first encountered Karen Whitmore. I was helping Tommy with his backpack, getting him ready for school, when a sharp knock interrupted our morning routine. The woman standing on our porch was immaculately dressed in a crisp white blouse and pressed khakis. Her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to stretch her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. "Mr. Davidson, I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She extended a manicured hand that felt cold and lifeless when I shook it. "I need to discuss your addition with you." Addition. I glanced back at the ramp, confused. "You mean the wheelchair ramp? We got approval for that months ago." Her smile was razor thin. Yes. Well, that approval was granted under the previous board. I've been reviewing all recent modifications, and frankly, this structure is problematic. Tommy wheeled up behind me, his school bag balanced on his lap. Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore, he said with the cheerful politeness we'd drilled into him since he was small. Karen's gaze flicked to my son, and for just a moment, I saw something ugly flash across her features before she composed herself. Good morning, dear. Shouldn't you be getting to school? I'm waiting for my dad. He drives me. Tommy's voice carried a note of pride that made my chest tight with emotion. Despite everything he'd been through, he still found joy in these small moments of normalcy. How nice. Karen's tone suggested it was anything but. She turned back to me, her expression hardening. Mr. Davidson, I need you to understand that property values in this neighborhood are a serious concern. This ramp, while I'm sure it serves a purpose, is quite frankly an eyesore. It's not in keeping with the aesthetic standards we maintain here. I felt my jaw clench. My son needs that ramp to access his own home. It's a medical necessity, not an aesthetic choice. I understand that, but surely there are alternatives. Perhaps a portable ramp that could be stored out of sight when not in use. Or maybe you could consider the rear entrance. The rear entrance was 3 times farther from the driveway and would require Tommy to navigate around the entire house every time he wanted to come or go. The suggestion was so callous, so completely tone-deaf, that I actually laughed. Mrs. Whitmore, with all due respect, that ramp stays exactly where it is. If you have a problem with it, you can take it up with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Her eyes narrowed. Don't quote federal law to me, Mr. Davidson. I know my rights as a homeowner and as president of this association. That structure is lowering property values, and I intend to do something about it. She spun on her heel and marched back to her house across the street, her movements sharp and aggressive. I watched her go, a cold unease settling in my stomach. In my line of work, I'd learned to recognize dangerous people, and Karen Whitmore had just revealed herself to be exactly that kind of person. Dad, why was she so angry? Tommy asked as we loaded into the car. Some people just have a hard time understanding what's important. Buddy, don't worry about it. But I was worried, very worried. The harassment began subtly. A formal letter arrived 3 days later, demanding we remediate the unsightly modification within 30 days or face fines. I responded with a copy of our original approval and a polite but firm refusal. The letter that came back was less polite. Your obstinate refusal to cooperate with reasonable community standards. It read, demonstrates a flagrant disregard for your neighbor's property rights. Further action will be taken if you continue to violate the covenant standards of Willowbrook Estates. I called the previous HOA president, Jim Morrison, who had approved our ramp. He was apologetic, but not particularly helpful. Mike, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Karen's been on a rampage since she took over. She's already forced 3 families to repaint their houses and made the Johnsons remove their garden fence. My advice, get a lawyer and document everything. Document everything. It was good advice. And, as an investigator, I should have been following it from the beginning. I installed a security camera system that weekend, positioning cameras to cover our front yard, driveway, and the ramp itself. Tommy helped me run the wiring, excited to be part of what he called our detective work. The cameras proved their worth sooner than I expected. I was reviewing footage from the previous night when I saw her, Karen Whitmore, dressed in dark clothing, creeping across our front yard at 2:47 a.m. She carried what looked like a large bottle and she spent nearly 10 minutes pouring something on and around the ramp. Even in the infrared footage, her movements were deliberate and methodical. The next morning, Tommy and I discovered what she'd done. The entire ramp reeked of bleach, and the wood had been stained white in several places where the chemical had soaked in. Worse, the metal handrails had been corroded, leaving rough patches that could cut bare skin. "Dad, I can't use this. It smells horrible. And look at these sharp parts." Tommy pointed to a particularly damaged section of railing, his voice small and disappointed. I was furious. This wasn't just property damage anymore. It was a deliberate attack on my son's ability to access his own home. I called the police immediately. Officer Patricia Gomez arrived within the hour, a competent-looking woman in her early 30s who took detailed notes and photographs. I showed her the security footage, watching her expression grow increasingly serious as she observed Karen's midnight vandalism. "Mr. Davidson, this is clearly criminal mischief, possibly assault, given that your son could have been injured by the damaged handrail. I'll write up a report and have a word with Ms. Whitmore." "What are the chances she'll face charges?" Officer Gomez's expression was sympathetic, but not encouraging. "Honest, unless she does something more serious. This will probably result in a warning, and maybe a small fine. First offense, no prior record, and she'll claim it was just cleaning supplies. But it's documented now, so if anything else happens..." Something else did happen. Something much worse. The conversation with Karen took place 3 days later, in full view of half the neighborhood. I was pressure washing the bleach residue from the ramp when she strode across the street, like a general leading a charge. "I hope you're planning to remove that thing while you're cleaning it," she announced, her voice pitched to carry. I shut off the pressure washer and turned to face her. "The only thing I'm removing is the damage you did to it." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Karen, I have you on security camera pouring bleach all over this ramp. Don't insult my intelligence." Her composure cracked slightly, a flush of anger rising in her cheeks. "You're harassing me with false accusations. I was simply trying to help maintain the appearance of this neighborhood by vandalizing my son's accessibility equipment, by trying to make you understand that your refusal to be reasonable is affecting everyone on this street." Her voice rose to a near shout. "Do you have any idea what that ugly thing has done to my property value? I've had 3 potential buyers walk away because they said the neighborhood looked too medical for their taste." I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the callousness of her words. "You're upset because my disabled son's medical equipment makes the neighborhood look too medical." "I'm upset because you're being selfish. There are 8 houses on this street, and you're dragging down the value of all of them because you refuse to find a reasonable alternative." Tommy chose that moment to wheel out of the house, having heard the raised voices. He looked between Karen and me with wide, worried eyes. "Hi, Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly. "Are you and my dad arguing about my ramp?" Karen looked down at my son, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of shame cross her features. But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. "Tommy, sweetie, your father and I are just having a discussion about what's best for the neighborhood. My ramp helps me get to school and go places. It's really important to me." "I'm sure it is, dear. But sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good." The casual cruelty of those words, delivered with a patronizing smile to a 9-year-old boy, pushed me over the edge. "Get off my property," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Now." Karen's mask of civility finally slipped completely. "You're making a mistake. Mr. Davidson, I tried to handle this reasonably, but you've chosen to be difficult. Don't blame me for what happens next." She stalked back to her house, leaving Tommy and me standing in the aftermath of her threat. My son looked up at me with troubled eyes. "Dad, what did she mean?" I knelt down beside his wheelchair, putting my hands on his shoulders. "I don't know, buddy, but whatever she meant, we're going to handle it together, okay?" He nodded, but I could see the worry in his young face. Karen Whitmore had just declared war on a federal arson investigator and his disabled son. She had no idea what she was up against. The fire happened exactly 1 week later. I was returning from a late-night call about a suspicious warehouse fire when I turned onto Maple Street and saw the orange glow, even before I could process what I was seeing. My investigator's instincts kicked in. The smell of gasoline was unmistakable, even from a block away. Now, as I held my traumatized son and watched the fire department extinguish the burning remains of his ramp, those same instincts were screaming at me. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. This was Karen Whitmore making good on her threat. Captain Rodriguez approached me as the last of the flames were doused. "Mike, I hate to ask this right now, but I need you to put on your investigator hat. What are you seeing here?" I gently set Tommy down on a patio chair and walked closer to the charred remains. Even in the darkness, with the smoke still rising, the evidence was clear. "Gasoline," I said, pointing to the burn pattern. "Poured in a line along the base of the ramp, then probably ignited with a match or lighter. The perpetrator would have had to get close, which means they were either very confident or very desperate." "Any suspects?" I was about to answer when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Across the street, Karen Whitmore stood in her upstairs window, barely visible behind the curtains, but I could see her face clearly enough to read her expression. She wasn't shocked or concerned like the other neighbors. She was satisfied. "Yeah," I said quietly, "I have a suspect." The investigation began immediately. As a federal arson investigator, I had access to resources that most victims of property crime could only dream of. I called in favors from the ATF's forensic lab and had my team collect evidence samples before the local fire department had even finished their work. The accelerant residue confirmed what I already knew: gasoline, applied liberally to ensure maximum damage. But there was something else. Something that made me smile grimly as I read the lab report. The gasoline contained a specific additive package that was only used by 3 gas stations in our county. More importantly, it contained trace amounts of a rare detergent compound that was only found at one of those stations. The Chevron station on 5th Street, less than a mile from our house. I requested the security footage from that station, focusing on the 12 hours before the fire. What I found was even better than I'd hoped. At 11:47 p.m., Karen Whitmore had filled a red gas can at Pump 3, paying with a credit card that provided an electronic trail. But I wasn't done. I also requested footage from the traffic cameras at the intersection of 5th and Maple. At 12:23 a.m., a white Honda Civic, matching Karen's car, had driven slowly past our house, made a U-turn, and returned to park in the shadows 3 houses down. The license plate was clearly visible. The final piece of evidence came from my own security system. At 12:31 a.m., a figure in dark clothing had approached our ramp, carrying what appeared to be a gas can. The infrared cameras captured everything: Karen pouring gasoline around the base of the ramp, lighting a match, and running back to her car. I had her dead to rights. The next morning, I called Officer Gomez and asked her to meet me at the police station. When I laid out the evidence, her eyes widened with each new piece of the puzzle. "Mike, this is incredible work. We have everything we need for an arrest warrant. I want more than an arrest warrant. I want federal charges." She looked puzzled. "Federal. This is arson of a residential structure, but it's not federal property." I smiled. "Officer Gomez, that ramp was built specifically to provide handicapped accessibility. Destroying it violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, which makes it a federal hate crime, combined with the arson charges. Karen Whitmore is looking at serious federal prison time." The arrest happened that afternoon. I watched from my living room window as 3 police cars pulled up to Karen's house. Red and blue lights flashing in the afternoon sun. She came out in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and outrage. She caught sight of me watching and mouthed something that was probably profane. Tommy was at school, spared from witnessing the culmination of our neighborhood's drama. I'd picked him up early and taken him to his grandmother's house, not wanting him to see the arrest. He'd been through enough trauma. But Karen's arrest was just the beginning. The real revelation came 3 days later, when I received a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Davidson, this is Jennifer Martinez from the Southern District Attorney's Office. I'm calling about the Karen Whitmore case." "Yes, I've been expecting to hear from you about the federal charges." "Actually, sir, I'm calling about something else. We've been investigating Ms. Whitmore for several months now, and your case has provided us with some crucial evidence." I sat up straighter. "What kind of investigation?" "HOA fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. Ms. Whitmore has been systematically stealing from homeowners association funds across 3 counties. The Willowbrook Estates account is missing over $40,000. The pieces clicked into place. Karen's obsession with property values wasn't just about aesthetics. She'd been embezzling money from the HOA and needed to sell her house quickly to cover her tracks. My son's ramp was a convenient scapegoat for her financial crimes. "How can I help?" "We'd like you to testify at the federal hearing next week. Your expertise as an arson investigator and your personal experience as a victim will be crucial to our case." The federal courthouse in downtown Sacramento was imposing, all marble columns and stern-faced statues representing justice. I'd testified in federal court before, but never as a victim, never with this much personal stake in the outcome. The hearing room was packed. I recognized several neighbors from our street, including Jim Morrison, the former HOA president. There were also people I didn't recognize, presumably victims from other neighborhoods where Karen had operated. Karen sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair now limp and unwashed. She avoided eye contact as I was sworn in, but I could feel her attention like a physical weight. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Martinez, was thorough and methodical. She walked me through the timeline of events, from Karen's first visit to our house through the discovery of the embezzlement scheme. "Mr. Davidson, in your professional opinion as a federal arson investigator, was this fire set intentionally?" "Without question. The burn pattern, the accelerant residue, and the video evidence all point to deliberate arson." "And the target of this arson was your son's wheelchair ramp?" "Yes, a ramp that was built with full HOA approval to provide handicapped accessibility for my disabled son." The defense attorney, a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, tried to suggest that Karen's actions were the result of stress and poor judgment rather than criminal intent. He painted her as a concerned neighbor who'd simply taken things too far. I wasn't buying it, and neither was the judge. "Mr. Davidson," the judge said during my testimony, "can you describe the impact of this crime on your family?" I took a deep breath, thinking of Tommy's terrified face as he watched his ramp burn. "Your Honor, my son has been through tremendous trauma. He was paralyzed in a car accident 8 months ago, and he's been working so hard to regain his independence. That ramp represented hope to him. It meant he could come and go from his own home without help. When Karen Whitmore set it on fire, she didn't just destroy property. She destroyed a 9-year-old boy's sense of safety and independence. The judge nodded grimly. And the defendant's motivation? Based on the investigation, I believe Ms. Whitmore was embezzling money from the HOA and needed to sell her house quickly to cover the theft. My son's ramp became a convenient excuse for her financial problems. She blamed it for lowering property values when in reality, she was the one stealing from her neighbors. The thermal imaging footage I'd obtained was particularly damning. The cameras had captured not just Karen's actions, but also the temperature signatures that proved premeditation. She'd poured gasoline in a specific pattern designed to ensure maximum destruction, then waited several minutes before igniting it to allow the fumes to spread. This wasn't a crime of passion. I explained to the court. This was calculated destruction of a disabled child's medical equipment. The chemical analysis was equally conclusive. The gasoline residue contained Karen's fingerprints, and the specific additive package traced directly back to her credit card purchase. There was no room for doubt about her guilt. But the most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source. Jim Morrison, the former HOA president, had kept detailed records of Karen's increasingly erratic behavior since taking office. She'd been systematically targeting families with any kind of visible differences, from the Patel's traditional garden to the Johnsons' pride flag. She called it maintaining standards. Jim testified. But it was really about control. She wanted everyone to conform to her vision of what the neighborhood should look like. The pattern of discrimination was clear and well documented. Karen hadn't just targeted Tommy's ramp. She'd been waging a campaign against anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of acceptability. When it came time for sentencing, the judge was uncompromising. Ms. Whitmore, you have been found guilty of federal arson, hate crimes under the Americans with Disabilities Act, embezzlement, and fraud. Your actions were not those of a concerned neighbor, but of a person who prioritized her own financial interests over the safety and dignity of a disabled child. The sentence was harsh, but fair: 5 years in federal prison, full restitution to all affected homeowners, and a lifetime ban from serving on any homeowners association board. Her house was seized to cover the embezzled funds, and she was ordered to pay for the complete reconstruction of Tommy's ramp. But the impact of the case went far beyond our small neighborhood. The federal prosecution had exposed a pattern of HOA abuse that existed in communities across the country. The case prompted new federal oversight of homeowners associations and strengthened protections for residents with disabilities. Tommy was back in school by the time the new ramp was completed. It was even better than the original, with anti-slip surfaces and LED lighting for safety. The contractor who built it was a veteran himself, someone who understood the importance of accessibility and independence. "Dad, it's perfect," Tommy said as he tested the new ramp for the first time. "It's even better than before." I watched him navigate the ramp with growing confidence, his natural resilience shining through once again. The trauma of the fire would always be with us, but it hadn't broken him. If anything, it had made him stronger. The neighborhood had changed too. With Karen gone and the embezzled funds returned, the Homeowners Association was rebuilt on principles of inclusion and community support. Jim Morrison returned as president, and one of his first acts was to establish a fund for accessibility improvements throughout the neighborhood. 6 months later, I received a letter from a family in Phoenix whose HOA was trying to force them to remove their son's sensory garden. They'd heard about our case and wanted advice on how to fight back. I spent an hour on the phone with them, sharing what I'd learned about federal disability rights and the importance of documentation. It wasn't the last such call. Our case had become a rallying point for families dealing with discriminatory HOAs, and I found myself informally consulting on similar cases across the country. Each family I helped felt like a victory, not just for them, but for Tommy and every other person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. The final chapter in Karen's story came 2 years later. When she was released from federal prison, she'd served her full sentence and was required to complete community service with a disability rights organization. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who'd tried to eliminate my son's access to his own home was now helping other disabled individuals navigate their communities. I never spoke to her again, but I heard through the legal grapevine that she'd genuinely changed. Prison had apparently given her time to reflect on her actions and their consequences. She'd become an advocate for the very people she'd once targeted. Tommy, now 11, had no interest in Karen's redemption story. He was focused on the future, on his friends, on his dreams of becoming a scientist like his dad. The ramp was just part of his daily routine now, no more remarkable than tying his shoes or brushing his teeth. But sometimes, on quiet evenings when we sat on the front porch together, he would look at the ramp and remember. "Dad, do you think she was just scared?" "Who? Karen?" "Yeah. Do you think she was scared of people being different?" I considered the question carefully. Tommy had a gift for cutting straight to the heart of complex issues. "I think some people are scared of things they don't understand, and instead of trying to learn and grow, they try to make those things go away." "That's sad." "Yes, it is. But you know what's not sad. All the good things that came from our fight. The new laws protecting families like ours. The other kids who don't have to worry about their ramps being taken away. The neighbors who learn to stand up for each other." Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "So, something good came from something bad." "That's usually how it works. Buddy, that's usually how it works." As the sun set over Willowbrook Estates, I watched my son practice wheelies on his perfectly functional, legally protected, absolutely beautiful wheelchair ramp. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful, filled with families who'd learned the true meaning of community. Karen Whitmore's house had been sold to a young couple with twin toddlers, and their laughter filled the air, where once there had been only anger and fear. The federal case had taken 2 years to fully resolve, but justice had prevailed. More importantly, it had opened a conversation about disability rights and community acceptance that continued to ripple outward. I'd received letters from families in dozens of states, thanking us for standing up and fighting back. Tommy's story had become part of the legal precedent that protected other children like him. His courage in the face of discrimination had helped establish stronger federal protections for disability access. The boy who'd once been trapped in his house by a burning ramp had become a symbol of resilience and hope. That night, as I tucked him into bed, Tommy looked up at me with serious eyes. "Dad, I'm glad you're good at catching bad guys." "I'm glad too, son. I'm glad too." Outside, the street was quiet and safe. The ramp stood strong and proud in the moonlight, a testament to the power of determination and the importance of fighting for what's right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases to investigate, new wrongs to right. But tonight, my son was safe. His independence was secure, and justice had been served. The federal arson investigator had faced off against the HOA Karen and won. But more than that, a father had protected his child. A community had learned to embrace differences, and a system of justice had proven that even the most vulnerable among us deserve protection and respect. In the end, that's all any of us can ask for. the chance to be safe in our own homes, to be accepted in our own communities, and to know that when injustice strikes, there are people willing to stand up and fight back. Tommy's ramp would stand for years to come, a symbol of accessibility, determination, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son. And somewhere, other children would roll safely up their own ramps, protected by the precedent we'd fought so hard to establish. Karen Whitmore had tried to burn down more than just a ramp. She'd tried to burn down hope, independence, and belonging. But fire, as any good arson investigator knows, can be a tool of destruction or a catalyst for change. In our case, it had been both. The flames that consumed Tommy's first ramp had ultimately forged something stronger, more resilient, and more meaningful than what came before. They'd forged a future where disabled children could move through their communities without fear, where differences were celebrated rather than hidden, and where justice wasn't just a word carved in marble, but a living, breathing reality. That future was worth fighting for. That future was worth everything.